I'm Simon St. Laurent, co-chair of OSCON. I'm here today with Rachel Nabors, founder of Tin Magpie, an interactive graphic novel publisher. Rachel's been working in connecting the form, the art of comics, of drawing to the web for years now, and has really found a different path into the web from what most of us take. Could you talk a little bit about how you got started and what brought you in?
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Simon. So, getting started in web development, I actually had no choice in the matter. I had started building websites and managing message boards and such back when I began my first company, which was a girls' comics publishing company. Basically, I was just self-publishing my own comics. I was hoping one day I would publish more than my own comics, but it just didn't happen for reasons we'll get to. But having that company, this was back before we had things known as social media, I thought I was just opening up social profiles to follow my fans around. But I managed newsletters. My first site was Drupal. I used what did I use? Well, in addition to gray matter, I think I also used Tin Can, PHP mailing list. I used all kinds of stuff to promote the comics. It was all about the comics. And then I was very successful at that for a number of years, won awards, had hordes of fangirls. It was an excellent living. I was doing very well for a cartoonist. But then disaster struck. I had to get jaw surgery. And cartoonists don't have health insurance or unions or salaries or savings. So I was like, what can I do that people will pay me money, enough money to get this fixed? And it turned out that web development people pay you quite a bit of money to do. So I ended up in web design, and then I decided design wasn't where my heart was at. I was much more fascinated by code. So I got into front-end development. It's also nice because in design, everybody has an opinion. I know the designers in the audience, wherever they are totally nodding their heads right now. Everybody has an opinion on a design, but only your peers have an opinion on your code. So I liked that. I liked only having peer feedback on code. So I kind of dug into CSS specifically was my love. And then I found out you can animate things with CSS. And I ended up quitting my job and traveling the world speaking about telling stories with code.
So the kinds of stories you tell have evolved from the work you did with cartoons before. And it seems like you've had a collision of the stories, the code, the style, and the result is a very different mix of visual and interactive than I would be used to from just reading online static images. And what happens when you bring those together?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like unless an artist or a developer has a background in the other's craft, you really can't know what's possible. I know all the different APIs that the browsers are opening up, and I know how to implement them. So every once in a while, I'll open up my browser in the morning, and I'll be looking at one of my newsletters from, Smashing or whatever, and I'll be like, just imagine I've got an idea. You could do. And that's not the sort of thing, that's not the sort of inspiration you'd be drawing if you just came from one of those fields. If you were an artist, you'd just be like, and I have this problem when I'm talking to artists. It's like, hey, we should collaborate and do something. And they're like, maybe a puzzle, or you could animate it, put a background music with it. I'm like, come on, guys. Let's be a little more punchy and creative. Think more like a game. What would you do if you could suddenly add game elements to your that usually pops them out of it? It's the same thing with developers too. It's like, whoa, text to speech. That's kind of cool, yeah. But you might be thinking how you could make an app with that. You might not be thinking, how can I make a story that talks back to the person who's reading it out loud to their kid? Just all kinds of fun things that you might not think about if you weren't thinking about both of them at the same time.
And you have to work with both sides at the same time. So it's not just you doing everything. You're also talking to artists. You're talking to developers. How does that connecting work?
It can be a little difficult sometimes. As I said, sometimes they have trouble visualizing the possibilities. But usually I'm able to find some people who are excited by them. And then it really just comes down to being able to speak each other's language. It's the funniest thing, but management techniques for artists, at least in my experience, artists, not designers, artists, is completely different from management techniques for developers. Respond to feedback in completely different ways. I think that's one of the things I enjoy more about code, is that I feel we can be much more frank and honest with each other. With artists and writers and such, I think you need to have more of an editorial outlook. If you've ever worked with an editor, you know that editors have a way of giving feedback and encouraging changes and helping people blossom and explore possibilities. To guide both sides of that equation, you really need to be good at both inspiring developers and helping the artists and the storytellers blossom in their own way. So that's tricky, because I've been asking each side of the equation as I've been going to these conferences and meeting with my comics friends, like, how would you handle an issue if you have a team member who's having some trouble talking about something, da-da-da-da-da, and I get completely different answers from both sides. So you've got to, I think, feel the situation out and always work on trying to help people be the best that they can be. It's not about you, it's about all of you together. So that can be the hardest thing to pop people out of.
As people are sort of coming together and finding these new possibilities, what kinds of new fireworks do you see emerging from this? It's just, I feel like we have two cultures that have worked together but have been kind of suspicious of each other. And when they really get together, there's so much more possible.
That's true. You see some really incredible things going on. Right now, specifically when it comes to comics meets the future of the web. In France, they have this new keyword called turbo media, which sounds like something from the Fast and the Furious, but it's French. They have weird words for everything that we have less weird words for. So basically, it's for these interactive graphic novels that change as you read them. It can be anything. It's part game, part animation, part comic book, and it's fascinating to watch the different ideas that these creators come up with. A lot of people still use Flash to make these sorts of things, but you're seeing increasingly more and more people make things using Canvas, or in my case, CSS and HTML. A really good example of modern turbo media, I think, is something called Homestuck, which I don't meet many people at conferences, at web development conferences, who've heard of it. I wish I had, but it's an interactive graphic novel that is popular with teenagers throughout the world right now. In fact, if you see people cosplaying, dressing up in costumes at comic conventions and they've got horns and gray paint on, they're dressed up as Homestuck characters. And originally the interactive parts were done in Flash, but as the series progressed, they started doing more and more of them in Canvas. So it's really exciting to check out the archives and see what these people have been coming up with in their spare time.
Great. It sounds like there's a lot happening. It sounds like there's a lot more to come, and I hope you keep bringing these different pieces together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.